Hello and welcome to Open Tech Convo. I'm your host Serigne Omar Lo Nicolas, and today we have with us Adrian McInman discussing the second topic of a three-part series on creativity. In this video, we will explore resistance to creativity. But before we look at that, we should question just how important creativity is. Because if it's not super important, then resistance to creativity is probably not that big of a deal. So please tell me, how important is creativity for businesses?
I like Chris Griffiths' approach. He suggests that expert knowledge no longer provides business people with the advantages that it used to, and the tried and tested solutions of the past don't solve current challenges. Instead, he views creativity as the power of business. Because no matter how intelligent you are, we have to be able to adapt and evolve. More than 60% of 1,500 leaders who participated in a study by IBM would probably agree with him, as they believe that creativity is the number one leadership skill needed for success.
Do most people have the same general feelings about creativity? In other words, are most people pro-creativity?
Jennifer Mueller and colleagues have researched this. They believe that when we are asked directly about creativity, we tend to be pro-creativity. For instance, she notes how we tend to view creativity as the engine of scientific discovery, the fundamental driving force for positive change, and for it to be associated with intelligence, moral goodness, and wisdom. Maybe a more interesting question would be to ask, why are we pro-creativity? Other researchers have looked into this question and noted that there is strong normative pressure to endorse creative ideas. Furthermore, we have a strong desire to want to appear pro-creativity. In other words, we have a strong social desirability bias against expressing any view of creativity as negative.
So when we express pro-creativity opinions, are we lying?
That is a great question. No, I wouldn't say that we are lying. Rather, I think a better way to view this would be to say that most people understand the need for creativity while having a negative bias against creativity all at the same time. For instance, teachers readily acknowledge that creativity is an important educational goal, and yet they tend to dislike students who exhibit curiosity and creative thinking. Likewise, business people strongly endorse creativity, and yet they routinely reject creative ideas. In other words, we have a deeply rooted negative view of creativity, which we do not openly acknowledge, and yet we understand the need for creativity.
If that is the case, why do we have this deeply rooted negative view of creativity?
The main reason is that novelty, which is arguably the most important characteristic in creativity, leads to uncertainty, and we have a strong desire to avoid uncertainty. So, even though we understand the need for creativity, it scares us. Not surprisingly, the more novel an idea, the more uncertainty it's likely to produce, and thus the more we're likely to get scared of it, and thus the more we're likely to reject it. So, we have two conflicting forces operating. First, we perceive that we're under considerable societal pressure to endorse creative ideas and be creative. Second, the novelty involved in creativity scares us into rejecting it.
In the first video on creativity, we discussed how to become more creative. In particular, we discussed 3 personality changes and 2 temporary techniques we can implement to increase creativity. However, it sounds like you're saying just because I or someone else generate an amazingly creative idea, it is far from a done deal that it will be implemented. Is that what you're saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying. In fact, there's a very good chance that if the idea is about the business world, then the idea will never be implemented. Matt Ridley has written a very interesting book about this phenomena, even though he's predominantly focusing on innovation and not creativity. He suggests that innovation is unpopular. People fear innovation, and thus they place obstacles in the way of innovators, just as we've discussed with creativity. However, he goes a step further and suggests that we're in an innovation famine, with big firms behaving non-courageously, playing it safe, controlling markets, and stifling competition and innovation.
So how can creators and innovators decrease resistance to creativity?
The resistance that we've been discussing is more of a direct concern for innovation than creativity. However, if managers view innovation as currently impossible, they will see little point in spending money and time on creativity. So, I think creators and innovators should remember 2 things and follow one piece of advice.
So what are the 2 things to remember?
First, virtually all creativity and innovation will encounter resistance, usually driven by people wanting to maintain the status quo. For instance, obstetricians rejected anesthesia during childbirth, and the Horse Association of America resisted the tractor. Second, the big business climate is not pro-innovation at the moment, as many managers in big companies, working cosily with big government, are shying away from uncertainty. They're making their organisations increasingly bureaucratic and focusing on compliance and regulation to deter new entrants from entering existing markets. And they're sitting on huge cash piles rather than investing their money on creativity and innovation.
And what is your final piece of advice?
Creators and innovators should always remember the link between uncertainty and resistance. Therefore, the more that creators can reduce uncertainty about their new creations, the greater the likelihood that their efforts will be turned into successful innovation. So, anticipate people's concerns and questions about your creative ideas and create answers for their anticipated questions.